Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, and in this video we will be covering something that has been constantly requested to me and I think is going to be very useful to you guys. I'm going to be showing you guys how you can know when you are strong enough to start clearing some bosses. People ask me this question on my stream all the time. I have blank amount of CP. I have blank amount of range. Do you think I could do this boss? Do you think I could do that boss? And in this video, you're going to learn how you can tell which bosses you can do, which bosses you can't do, what you don't want to bother doing or not, and all of that kind of stuff. We're also going to be going over Maplescouter, if you know what that is. So the first thing that you got to understand about MapleStory bossing is you need to ask yourself, what type of person are you? Are you the type of person that's willing to sit down in a boss for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe the whole 30 minutes, 15 minutes? Maybe you only want to clear within 5 minutes. Like, maybe do you only want to do the boss if you can one burst it? Like, what are you looking for here? The reason why that's so important is because a lot of people, and I mean a lot of people, will only bother doing bosses if they can kill it within less than 5 minutes. Like, they don't want to sit down and do Dark Now the entire time. They don't want to sit down and do Gloom, Vihala. They don't want to do a 50-minute Black Mage run, which is, to be honest with you, that's fine. Like, you are perfectly entitled to spend your time however you want it. But at the same time, you should know that if you have that kind of mindset, you're going to be clearing bosses in this game way later than you otherwise could have. Which means that you could get drops so much later than everyone else. You could finish your liberation so much later than everyone else. You're going to get money from boss crystals way later, all that kind of stuff, because you don't want to sit down in a boss and actually do it. You just want to burst it and leave, which is fine. You could play like that if you want. Me personally, I don't want to play like that. And for the people that want to know, when can I start clearing bosses like at really low damage so I could just start getting the clears as early as possible, then this is the perfect video for you. Another thing that is very important to understand about wanting to know when you can clear certain bosses is that a lot of the information here is not going to give you a definitive answer. Like, I can't just give you a number and be like, if you're 50 mil CP, you could do H-Well. If you're 20 mil CP, you could do Lotus, stuff like that. That doesn't work. The reason why that doesn't work is because a lot of things are not factored into your combat power. Your Hexa skills are not factored into your combat power. Your IED is not factored into your combat power. Your own hands, like how good you are at the game, is not factored into your combat power. So it's pretty much impossible to just give a across the board number that you could just say, like, I have this combat power, I have this range, I have this stat, I can go do this boss. That's not how this game works. Even if somebody were to do a full rotation BA where they sit down, they analyze all of their damage and say, oh, I do this much damage per second, that's still not going to give you a definitive answer of whether or not you can clear a boss. Now, this might seem like a cop-out answer, but just to be real quick, the best way to find out if you can clear a boss is to go inside the boss and do it and see if you can clear it. I know it sounds really dumb, but it's the best way to really know if you could do a boss or not. Because at the end of the day, even if you have the damage requirement to do it, like if everybody's telling you, oh, of course, you're more than strong enough to kill the boss. If you don't know how to do the boss, if you don't know how to do your class rotations, if you don't know how to dodge the mechanics and stuff like that, none of that matters. You're going to die out. You can't clear. So the most important thing is to actually go in there and try to clear the boss. So I'll give you two different scenarios. I'm on my FP, for example, and let's say I want to start doing Hard Lotus. So I'm going to enter Hard Lotus and I'm going to start using some of my skills, see how much damage it does. You know, let's say I just pop my Origin. This isn't obviously a proper rotation, but I'm just going to, go in and just see what happens. You can see that I'm doing a pretty good amount of damage with just my Origin, quick combo. Like, I've done like 20% of the boss so far and it's only been like 30 seconds. So I'm just going to think like, oh, I'm shredding through this boss pretty quickly. Like, it's only been 30 seconds and 30% of the boss has been killed already. Like, I feel like I could definitely clear this. So that's scenario number one. You actually just go into the boss, you use some of your skills, and you're like, oh, wow, like, I'm doing more damage than I thought. So you gain a confidence boost and you're like, let me try actually clearing it. And you keep practicing and you do it. So scenario one basically shows that, hey, if you go in and you try it, you never know. You might actually have more damage than you think and you can actually clear the boss. But then you run into another problem, which is practicing. But that's why we have this lovely practice tool where you can enable practice mode, go to the practice mode settings, put on whatever buffs that you want, and then enter. That way you know if you can clear the boss or not. And you got to keep practicing, which is very, very important, because another thing that is very common is you actually do have the damage, you just don't have the practice. So it might seem like you don't have the damage, but in reality, you just don't know what you're doing and you need to practice. And when I say practice, I mean not just like 2 runs where you die out in phase 1. I mean potentially over 10 runs until you clear, maybe 20 runs, whatever it takes to clear. Practicing on this game should be viewed as like farming. Obviously, we know how important farming is. It gives you all the resources to make your gear and get stronger. But practicing is like farming for your IRL hands. It makes you better at the game, which makes you do more damage without even upgrading your gear. So for example, let's say you're hitting the boss, and when you practice, you'll notice that you're only hitting it like 50% of the time. But as you get better, you start hitting it 75% of the time. Your gear did not change at all, but you went from hitting it 50% of the time to 75% of the time. So you just gained 50% more final damage because your damage uptime just increased from you being better at the game. Now, scenario number 2 is you really don't know whether you can clear a boss or not. So you heard my advice and you're like, all right, Duky, I'm going to go try it. I'm going to go see if I could clear the boss because you said to go try it, right? So you go enter the boss and see what happens. You start hitting Saren and you're like, whoa, I'm doing no damage. This is crazy, Duky, you lied, bro. Like, you said if I enter the boss in practice, I could clear. No, that's not what I said. You need to gauge your damage first. When you enter the boss, you need to actually try it and gauge your damage. If you're doing your skills and you notice that not even 1% of the boss's damage has gone down, then you clearly are way too weak to try this boss out. And, like, you're going to get bricked on this thing. Okay, I did 0.1% in like a minute, so I'm definitely not going to be able to clear this boss. So with scenario number 2, you're too weak to do the boss, and then you need to ask yourself, okay, when am I going to be strong enough to clear the boss? Now, you have to think about, why are you too weak to clear the boss? Is it because you don't have enough IED? Is it because you don't have enough CP, like your gear just isn't good enough? Or maybe you just don't have enough sacred power? Or maybe you're not high enough level. So this is where educating yourself on bosses' stats really, really matters. So believe it or not, me at 50 mil CP, just in terms of my raw gear, is actually strong enough for Saren. Like, my gear is good enough to do Saren. The things that are holding me back, though, is my sacred power and my level. Since Saren is level 275 boss, that means I have a lot of damage reduction on her because I'm only 262. And since Saren requires 200 Sacred Force in Phase 2, I only have 50. That means I have a stupid amount of damage reduction on her. So even if nothing were to change in terms of my gear, all I would have to do is level up, get more Sacred Force, and then I'd be strong enough to do Saren. So it's not always just about gear. It's not always just, I need to get better gear. I need to get better gear. I hear this stuff all the time from players who they actually have crazy gear. Like, their gear itself is cracked out, like full 22, full 3 line. They have pitch, they have Eternals and everything, but they're only level 280 and they only have like 6,000 frags or something. So they still can't do C Kalos because at the end of the day, the levels and the frags and all that stuff is just as important. So my main point is educating yourself on how the bosses work and where damage comes from is very, very important. Some people also compare boss mules with my boss mules, for example. My characters have maxed out nodes, max boost nodes, max skill nodes, all that stuff, right? And if you actually look at what leveling a node does, you can see that it literally gives the skills final damage. So a skill that's level 40 versus a skill that's level 60, there's a 40% final damage difference between those skills. That's a huge, huge, huge amount. That's why some people are like, oh, but your boss mule is this CP. How come it's doing so much more damage than me? Because CP is not the only thing that determines how strong you are. There's nodes, IED, and a bunch of other factors as well. If you want to know where a lot of damage comes from in this game, I have a whole video that I made about it linked below. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is something called MapleStory Scouter, or Maplescouter. And you'll probably hear this term be thrown around maybe in streams or YouTube videos or something, but it's a tool that was developed in Korean MapleStory and works pretty well for our version of MapleStory as well. And it tells you how strong you are pretty accurately, to be honest with you. and it'll let you know when you can clear bosses above Lomian. So for me, when I inputted my fire poison stats, right, like everything you see on screen here, it spit out this result saying I could do normal Lomian easily, slime easily, normal Lucid Will easily, gloom easily, normal Darkanel, hard Lomian easily, which is pretty accurate. That's been my experience playing my fire poison. These bosses are very easy for me to do. But something like Chaos Gloom, Hard Will, and Hard Lucid, it says possible. So possible basically means like you're able to do it, but you have to probably try somewhat, and it's not going to be a fast run. But you're able to do it, definitely. And then there's solo play min cut, which means that you're able to do it, but you're going to have to be there for a very long time, and it's going to take a while to clear. You're going to have to actually practice for a while. It's definitely going to be over a 20-minute run, and you're going to have to sit there and grind the boss out. But it's definitely possible, right? And then there's party min cut, which means that I am barely strong enough to join a party for this boss. So hard black mage, because it's level 275, because it needs max arcane force, I don't have those things. Even though my CP is good, if I were just a higher level, I would definitely be able to join, but because I'm not, it's party min cut. And then the rest of the bosses just says straight up impossible. No matter what I do, I will never be able to clear this boss. I will never be able to at least 5% on the boss. It's impossible. Now, if you want me to make an entire video on how to use Maplescouter, inputting everything, I can. Let me know in a comment below. But this is what it looks like. Like you just input all of your stats and stuff, and then you press submit, and then you go to detailed information, and it'll tell you a lot of information on what the bosses you can clear are and everything like that. Now, I know we just talked about Maplescouter, but at the end of the day, Maplescouter is not 100% accurate. It's a good tool to use. Definitely, I think it's worth using it as a tool, but it's not 100% accurate because like I mentioned earlier in the video, at the end of the day, you have to go inside the boss and try it out yourself. There's no escaping that, because there's so many people that I've seen that are strong enough to do Darkanel, for example, but they don't do it because they haven't done enough practice, so they end up doing normal Darkanel. But then they also complain that they don't get arcanes, and arcanes never drop, but they're also not doing bosses that drop arcanes. So it's like, you have to be honest with yourself here. Are you too weak, or do you not want to learn the boss and you're too lazy to grind it out? Some people are probably too weak, and some people just don't want to grind out the boss, and that's fine. But like I mentioned earlier, if you don't want to grind out the boss, then you're going to be clearing stuff way later than you normally should have. I want you guys to understand that bossing in this game is very similar to farming. It's something that you have to practice. It's something that you have to keep doing over and over again until you get really, really good at it. The reason why a lot of people, you might see them as like, oh, that person is so much further ahead of me. It might not necessarily be because of their gear. A big part of it could just be because they practice bosses a lot more and they cleared stuff way earlier than you, and they develop those skills that are going to translate into further and further bosses. So they're going to continue to keep clearing stuff earlier and earlier than you because they have that practice already built in. Another thing that I think is very useful in trying to learn when you can start clearing some bosses is just simply looking it up on YouTube and see if anybody posted any boss videos and what their stats were. I love this guy Essenia's channel, Actual Goat. He posts so many boss solos on different classes. So for example, he has this video, 61 mil CP Angelic Buster, 15-minute Hard Will Liberation solo, 1.3x AF, which means that he doesn't have the max arcane force boost. And you can see some information about his character here. You can see he even opens up his stats in the video. There's a lot of videos like these, so you can see how people are probably doing things at surprisingly lower damage than you might think. I even have some of my own videos sometimes, like 29 mil CP Night Lord Hard Lucid solo. And then you could see the items that I had and stuff like that. So looking it up and seeing what people are doing is very, very important. The advice that I have to give you though is make sure when you're looking stuff up, like let's say I look up MapleStory around Darkanel solo, right? Make sure you're looking at videos that are uploaded probably within the last few months or something, because a lot of these videos, either they're old and the boss is like not the exact same mechanics anymore, or the classes got buffed and nerfed. So keep that in mind. And then last but definitely not least, a low-key way of finding out how strong you are and see if you clear a boss is to simply just ask me on my stream. Pull up to my stream, ask me, and I'll let you know. There you go. Anyways, if this video helped you out, maybe consider helping me out by subscribing, pulling up to my Twitch stream, or, you know, sharing the video or anything like that. Let me know if you guys have cleared any bosses at pretty low damage and what your accomplishments are. I'm interested to see how strong you guys are and stuff like that. Also, this all applies to baby bosses too. Like, it doesn't have to just be big bosses. It could be Hella and stuff like that too. Just go in and try it and see if you're actually able to do it. And then if you got to this part of the video, I want you to say the word glow, like my guild, here. I want you to say the word glow. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day. Shout out to my members, Blazefire, Shooms, Shagad, Ravi Espa, Koga, Piconir, Jesse B, Dante Victory, CK, Prelman, J, and Blunt Poppy Supreme Oil Backwards. I appreciate you guys so much and have a great day.